Good evening, everyone. How are you? Okay. Good to see you. Glad you're out. It's really cold outside for some. It just feels really cold. Colder than normal for some. Okay, before we get started, I want a quick little announcement here. There is a new quarter is starting at the school, and there's an online class that is going to be offered. It's the Minor Prophets, and it's open to everybody. It starts February 6th. David Jones, preacher at Shade Valley, is going to be preaching it. And so I'm going to put this up in the back. So if you're interested, it's going to be on Tuesday evenings, 7 to 9 p.m. Tuesday evening online. And so you will be able to, if you don't have a computer, you can be able to do it on your phone. And if you don't know, if you want to do it, but you have no idea how to work all that, but you do have a phone that's able to do it, then I'm more than willing, they'd be more than happy to help you navigate through your complicated smartphone and get you hooked up where you can actually watch and participate in the class. Okay, so that's Minor Prophets, Tuesday night, 7 to 9, starting February 6th, and it'll be worth your time. All right. If you have your Bibles, we can open up to the book of Hebrews, chapter number 11. Hebrews, chapter number 11. Such a good chapter. So good. We started last week with verse number 1, and we were really trying to get a good definition of faith there, and or a good description of faith in verse number 1 there. And we started getting into this list of Old Testament names, characters, people that we would be familiar with as we would read through the Old Testament. And we talked a little bit about Abel, didn't we? And we kind of we stopped kind of in the middle of that. I'll read verse 4 again. Let's just read verse 4, 11:4. It says, by faith, Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous. And we have that testimony or that witness right here being recorded for us, that he was righteous, Abel was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and through it, he, being dead, still speaks. Is that God or Abel? Okay, that's Abel. That's the easiest question of the night. So that's Abel, and he's still speaking. So this is likely a reference to, if you can remember the Cain and Abel situation. And Cain kills Abel, right? And then Cain tries to play it off. Where remember God comes to Abel and he says, where's your brother? And he says, who am I? Am I my brother's keeper? And God says, do you remember what God says? It's a very interesting phrase that God responds to Cain with. What does he say?
Your brother's blood cries from the ground.
Okay, the voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. That's exactly right, yeah. All right, so there was no hiding what Cain did. And so this is probably when he says, what does it say? And through it, he being dead still speaks. This is probably a reference, not a specific, telling us something about Abel's blood talking, but it's Abel's example, even though he's long gone, is still speaking to us today. So that's a little callback to Genesis 4 and verse number 10 there. So Cain wasn't going to be able to get rid of, Abel's example, what Abel did, what Abel offered to God, that sacrifice that Abel gave, really put to shame Cain, right? It really shamed Cain. It caused him, Cain's sacrifice was not accepted. God was not pleased, and his brothers was, and so Cain was put to shame to that, and Cain was not going to get rid of Abel's example by getting rid of Abel himself, you see, right? Does that make sense? And so Abel's example still in Cain's entire life, throughout his entire life, would have still spoken to how Cain was supposed to offer to God, right? And how that relationship was supposed to work between him and God. And of course, it's the same today, right? Abel's example, here we have it in Hebrews 11. It's still speaking to us today. It's still teaching us a very important truth. And so even today, like someone was playing the part of Cain, and someone tries to say something or do something that is going to change the definition of what biblical faith is, it's just not good. It's not going to work. So nothing anyone would say or do today is going to change the truth about what biblical faith really is, how to obtain this biblical faith, and how it is related to God being pleased in everything that we do, including our worship, which is what Abel and it was a type of worship, was it not? It's what Cain and Abel were doing, worshiping God. There was a wrong way to worship, which Cain did, and there was a right way to worship, which is what Abel did. And what made the big difference is that Abel was doing what God said to do, right? And this is the conclusion that we came to. And Cain was not doing what God has said to do. And that really is such a amazingly simple truth that answers our questions today about how should I be worshiping God and in what way and all of that, right? It's an amazingly simple thing that maybe we're overlooking. How in the world are we ever, so the way we worship today is the way we should worship how God wants us to worship. Okay, well, how do we know how God wants us to worship? It's going to be, he hasn't left that open for us to kind of figure out on our own and like piece together all these little, like a big old 10,000 piece puzzle. It's just kind of thrown out there in the world, and it's up to us to kind of figure it all out, piece it together. And some might get a little bit of portion of it over here, and some might get a little portion over here. And that means this person's worshiping this way, and this person's worshiping. No, it's not like that. What we're going to go to do is see, we can start in the beginning with Genesis and see what kind of God he is. And then we get to the New Testament. We understand that's our law and that's our covenant. We're under Christ now, and we can figure out how to properly worship God. I mean, does that make sense? And we don't have to question it. We don't have to wonder about it. Okay. Any comments or questions? Okay, great. So great. It's very quiet. Okay, verse number 5. Now we're moving on from Abel. He says, by faith Enoch was taken away, so that he did not see death, and was not found, because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony that he pleased God. Okay, so this is worded a little bit differently than verse 4 and some of the following verses, right? So by faith Abel offered, and you get this action word, right? He offered. But this one's a little bit different, right? It says by faith Enoch was taken away. Well, there is an action there, but Enoch was not the one doing the taking away, right? God did the taking, not Enoch. And but you can put it all together, and and we say his actions were from his faith, and those actions pleased God, and because he pleased God, he was taken away, right? Or translated. Is that the word that King James?
I said he walked with God.
Okay, yeah, he walked with God. That's his act. Yeah. So we're going to read that in a second. Okay. But does it say translated?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Translated. He was moved from. That's what that means. It was moved from one place to another. That's what that is. And, we're translated into the kingdom. I think that's what is that? What are we translated into the kingdom? Nikki, what is that? I think it's Colossians, was it Colossians 1:9 or something like that? I forget anyways, but we're translated into the kingdom. So that means we were not in the kingdom and we were taken and we were put into the kingdom, So basically we were lost and we were saved into the kingdom. Okay, anyways. So we don't know much about Enoch, do we? There's not really a lot about him.
Why did God sometimes do that? They wouldn't see death.
Just take people?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Of course, we know the other person that sort of went away like this without dying is Elijah. But why God chose to do that with only 2 people that we know of, I don't know. That's a good question.
Maybe they were very special to them.
It had to be, right? Had to be. I'd like to think that God did that at least partly because it could teach us something about walking with God and being pleased with God. You know, maybe there's a lesson.
Is this Enoch the son of Cain?
No. Let's see. No, this would be a different Enoch.
He's the father of Methuselah.
I think this Enoch is in the lineage of Seth, I think. Okay. What's that now? He's the father of Methuselah? Yeah. Yeah, so let's read it. It's Genesis chapter 5. I don't know if I said that yet. Genesis chapter 5. And 21 through 24 is basically all we get. This is all we get of this Enoch. So it says Enoch lived, well, we can go up to 18 and see his birth, right? Let me see who his father was. But then 21 says, Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. And after he begot Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Which it kind of makes it like, so the first 65 years he didn't walk with God. That's what it kind of implies, doesn't it? Which is interesting. But then 24, and then Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Now that's all we had. We might guess that, oh, he died and God took him to heaven or something like that. But we have Hebrews, which tells us, so if you're wondering, like, so did he die or did he not die? Well, Hebrews 11:5 says he didn't see death, so we know he didn't die. Okay. And it seems as if people were looking for him. Methuselah, all the days of being, and we know what, and he was not. The idea is that people in the language, the Hebrew it's that people, like where did he go? People were wondering where he was and looking for him. Kind of like they were looking for Elijah. If you remember, Elijah got taken up in the whirlwind, right? And the chariot was seen, and he's taken up in a whirlwind. And then all the other prophets were coming to Elisha, and they were saying, hey, give us some time and go look for him. I don't know if y'all remember reading that. Because they're like, no, that he couldn't have gone like that. There's no way. And so they looked for him. I think it was 3 days. They looked for him, and they couldn't find him. And so, yeah, they had to come to the conclusion that, yeah, okay, wow, God really took him. It seems that Enoch was, and people are doing that with Enoch the same way. So there's one other thing about Enoch that a lot of people don't know, probably, is that he was a prophet. And how we know that he was a prophet is from the book of Jude and verse number 14. Chapter 1 of Jude and verse 14, where it says, Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied about these men, saying this and that. So he was a prophet. And so when you read, so we kind of put that together, and we read, okay, so he walked with God. There were some actions, he had some faith-pleasing actions that he did, And so in some capacity, we don't know, he did the work of a prophet, right? And if you think about the rest of the lineage, the rest of the guys that came after him, you get to Noah, and you have this growing state of the world in which everything was going very, very badly, and the thoughts and intents of man's heart was evil continually. And so it makes sense that God would have prophets trying to turn people back, and Enoch would be one of them. So by faith, Enoch walked with God. That is, he as a prophet, he had to speak what God wanted him to speak. Enoch would have listened to God, he would have obeyed God, and because of that, he was rewarded in this very spectacular way, unique way that only happened to one other man, just taken from the earth, and he didn't have to face death. And there's Enoch, the end. Any questions or comments about what was said there about him? The point is, remember the point is about by faith, these actions were taken, and that's what pleased God. And so again, we have yet another example. We're going to see 10 or 20 of them in this chapter where faith and works go hand in hand. All right, verse number 6 is kind of connected with what we just read. But without faith, it is impossible to please him, for he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. So just in case anyone ever doubted the Old Testament record of Enoch's faith, we have this particular verse right here that connects that to it. So what kind of faith is needed to please God? Well, it would be a faith that acts. It would be a faith that obeys, right? Because we've already seen it 4 and 5, and we're going to see it time and time again from 7 on. One read through this chapter. One read. The first time, you could never have read it before, and you read through it for the first time ever. A person who doesn't know anything about God or anything about faith or what it takes to please God or anything like that, they are going to know, if you read through chapter 11, you're going to come out knowing that a belief in someone out there in the cosmos that's going to do something someday, that's not enough. That's not enough. And there's people who believe that. I mean, and that's it. And they're kind of satisfied with that. And there's some kind of like entity out there, cosmic entity. And he's probably going to do, he's watching, he's probably going to do something someday. And that's it. And it's no wonder that they're not moved to do anything, because why would you move on something like that if that's it? That's your whole faith, right? Kind of convenient, because no obligations to go along with that, no responsibilities to go along with that. But if you want to be in an eternity where you're going to enjoy things, then that's not enough. That's just not enough. And so one must believe that the God of the Bible is, right? That's what it says, that he is. What's that mean? That he's real, that he exists.
No one above him.
There's no one above him, that he's the one true God.
Eternal.
He's eternal. And then one must believe, and it's got to start there, because you're not going to care that God sent Jesus Christ to die for your soul if you're not even convinced that God's there, that he's the one, right? Then you must believe that he's a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. You got to believe in his goodness. We might say a person must believe in his omnibenevolence, right? And Enoch, and of course we can say this about all of these people listed in this chapter, Enoch did those things. He did these things right here. Now, what do you think it means to seek God? How would you explain that? Someone says, And you gotta be diligently, I gotta seek him.
Well,
And someone asks you, so how do I do that?
Study. You study, you seeking more. You will diligently study,
Study the Bible.
yeah, the Bible.
And if you don't understand it, get someone to help you that does know.
Yeah, like, and that's not a problem, is it? Because we have an example in Acts 8 where the man didn't understand the scriptures, and so he wanted someone to guide him. And so it's not a problem. Yes, ma'am?
I said have a relationship.
Have a relationship. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Him by talking to him, looking for him.
Right, yeah. So he can't be, so God is so far above us, right? But it's never meant, we're supposed to draw near him, right? We're supposed to draw closer to him. And so seeking him in the right way is going to allow us to have a better, as you put, have a better relationship, have a better father-child relationship, which is what he is to us, a father. Anything else?
Okay.
And so, basically seeking is gaining knowledge of him. You got to come to know who God is. And that's going to happen how? How are you going to know about God's omnibenevolence? By reading the Bible. It's going to happen. And so, again, if we're just piecing this together, we're just like walking through the words of the verse, and you see that his word, and his word for us, today is the Bible. It's connecting the Bible to what it means to have a saving faith. Which means without the Bible, you cannot possibly have a saving faith. I wouldn't even know how to make that up if you could, how that would happen. You gotta have the Bible. And so to diligently seek him, that puts it in a whole nother realm, right? You just seek him, and then once you find him, you're like, all right, cool, that's who God is. That's where he is. And to diligently would be, well, you put forth effort and hard work, but I would say that it's a continual, it's a continually seeking. You do it for a lifetime. You learn of God, and then you continue to learn of God, and so you closer and closer and closer together. And the more, because he knows everything about you, but it's going to take a lifetime to know all we can possibly squeeze in about God. But that's a good thing. What's that?
Learn of his ways.
Yeah, you can learn of his ways, right? And Jesus said that we need to learn of him in Matthew 11:28. Yes, sir.
look at two of the examples that we see here in chapter 11. Cain's faithful existence.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry,
Abel,
Abel's faithful existence. And we pattern our lives after this, how they continue to trust in God.
Mm-hmm.
And he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him.
That's right. That's right.
Chuck.
Tom and then
Not only studying and learning, seeking, I think obedience plays a part of that too. Not only seeking and learning, but obeying what you learn and what you're seeking.
right. You develop this faith, and the faith has to act. Yes, which is basically what this this whole chapter is all about. David.
I was just gonna say, you used to hear it called the living word instead of just saying the word. You used to hear it quite often, and it is the living word.
Okay, yeah, it's living. Hebrews 4:12, right?
He is alive right now.
Mm-hmm.
Saying, we seem to think we're reading here, but this, when we read, God's speaking to me. I
Mhm.
feel like that. And seems like I used to see the Bible, it would say the living word on the front, maybe but it seems like I used to see it. And I think we need to start talking more like that, especially when we're trying to speak with someone about God's word.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to study God's living word, just so that some people don't know God's alive and well.
Right, yeah, it's a shame that, I mean, you're probably right, and it's a shame that that can't just be implied in our conversation, you know? It's kind of like, and I don't think there's nothing wrong with this, saying this, but, if the Lord wills, you know, we'll say, if the Lord wills, and even in my emails, sometimes I'll say, not all the time, I'll say, you know, I can't wait to see everybody Sunday, blah, 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 you know, and it'll be good to be together if Lord willing.
Right, will be done.
Right. I mean, but do we have to say that every single time we say something? No, because I think we all understand. I remember having a conversation with a brother about this, and I thought he was right, that it's implied, like, of course, if the Lord wills, you know, if I'm talking to you, everything that I say out of my mouth doesn't have to be followed with the Lord wills, right? Right? Because me and you would have to be, you know, Christians and we're friends and we have an understanding of what, we know what each other believe, right? But it's a shame that with the more people we come across today, they don't know that God's alive, and they think this is a dead book. And so Hebrews 4:12 would be a good verse to go to right away, you know, to show that it is alive and well, and that it has application to us. And really, that's kind of the idea of Abel being dead still speaks. This was never dead, but it was written a very long time ago. But that doesn't matter because it still speaks, right? Yeah, it's still alive. Okay, verse number 7. It says, moving on to another fellow. By faith Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness, which is according to faith. Right. You see that phrase, things not yet seen. Well, that's kind of like the whole theme of what's going on here, right? Of this whole faith in action chapter. So we're not going to go back and read about Noah, but God warned Noah of the flood, right? And here's something, well, in the New King James it says divinely warned. And you're going to see in some translations it's going to be just warned of God, right? Right? So warned of God, divinely warned, that means the warning came from God. Okay, so it's the same thing. It's one word. It's one word. Warned of, divinely called would be the same thing. And what's interesting is that when you read of the new name, Christian, they were first called Christians in Antioch. That's Acts 11 and verse 26. That word called, they were first called Christians. Called is the same word that is used here for warned of God, or divinely warned, or divinely called. And so what that tells us about Acts 11, I mean, if this is right, and that's the way that word is meant to be used, then Acts 11, they weren't just called, like some guy just came across them and said, like, hey, let's call them Christians. No, they were divinely called by God. They were called Christians. So the name Christian is not just something that was just kind of flippantly given out. It was a name that was meant to be. It was from God. When you read in Romans 7 and verse 3, where if a woman marries another man while her husband is still living, she's going to be called an adulteress. Same word, that's right here. So it's not just someone's going to be, she's committing adultery. Somebody's going to call her that. The public will call. No, Paul is saying there that God, it's a divine calling. God will view that woman as an adulteress. You see. So now, and then you have it's the same word when the wise men were warned, divinely warned to go another way. Back in Matthew 2, same word. So it came from God. Cornelius was divinely warned in a dream. Same word. Called, warned by God. And that was just interesting where you see, so when you see this in other places, and of course it helps to have, you know, helps to have the Greek and all that mess out, but, well, it's not a mess, but it's interesting, especially 11:26 of Acts and Romans 7 in verse number 3, where you see it's not just the public or the church calling these and giving these names out. These things come from God. Okay. So Noah was warned, and then he believed God, right? Because he moved with godly fear. That means he believed God in what he said. Now, here's the thing. Things are not yet seen, right? So Noah completely and totally believed, despite having never seen a flood of such magnitude. Despite having no natural evidence that a thing was going to soon happen, despite all the naysayers of his day ridiculing him for building a boat in the middle, a big boat like this, and Noah being preaching about why he's doing it and what he's going to do with it. And despite Noah still moved, despite it taking over 100 years for this flood to come after Noah was told about it. And so you get the idea of just how great of a faith he had in God, right? Despite all of those things kind of working against him, we still had that faith to act, and he acted upon that faith. He moved, there's your action word, and prepared the ark. He moved on his faith. Imagine, and I like this account of Noah, and because of how it shows where faith, so the idea of faith only, and when you're talking to someone about faith only stuff, you have to be sure you're defining faith in the same way, or you're going to be saying different things. Now, if I were to say at one time, in one breath, faith only saves you, but then I defined what I meant by faith. I defined that faith coupled with obedience. Would you then agree that faith only saves? I mean, because I'm coupling it with obedience, and it's riddled throughout New Testament. So if I'm having a conversation about faith only, and that's the way we're both defining faith, then I'm fine. I'm fine with that. But if faith only and how you normally see it, and how it's normally been taught, if it's just belief only, you just have a belief only and nothing, then that's where the problem, that's where the Bible and that belief start butting heads. And you see this all throughout chapter 11 here, but especially with Noah, right? So he was divinely warned, and he believed God that the flood was coming. And if he had stopped right there and did nothing else at all, would his faith, that faith only, that belief only, would he have been saved from the flood? If he had done nothing else but believed God and what he said?
Yes, because he put it into action.
Okay, well, no, but I said he's not putting it into action.
Oh,
He said if you only believe.
If he only believed.
You had to stick that 3-letter word in there.
So faith only didn't work for Noah, did it? Faith only didn't work for Abel either, and it wouldn't have worked for Enoch either, and it wouldn't work for Abraham or Isaac or Sarah or any of those. Can't be faith. So his obedience, I'll get to you in a second. His obedience. So think of his obedience, doing what God said to do, saved his family. Would you agree with that? Okay, now, but what if I said his faith, Noah's faith in God saved his family? Would you agree with that? So his obedience saved his family, his faith saved his family. So what does that do with obedience and faith? Yeah, it's kind of like that thing. So I'm teaching math to Asher and some triangle stuff, and it's his logic too. But so if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. Get it?
I never could get
Well, that's true. I mean, and so this is kind of what we're, We'll talk later. I'm not gonna be drawing triangles though. And I really think that, it's a simple to understand, yet for some reason, it's something that people tend to want to avoid. Maybe because of the implications that would follow it and what it would mean for their belief or their past belief or their actions moving forward in trying to be a Christian. We'll close with your comments, sir, so make it good.
Sure, yeah, so faith drives belief, and then obedience. If you don't act on your faith, then you don't believe.
Okay, I mean, in one sense, I think you're right, yeah. You don't really truly believe if you don't act upon.
But I hear what you're saying, but I'm not gonna put my all in it.
Yeah, that's right, And that's right. And we see a little bit of that in Hebrews chapter 3, where the people could not enter in God's rest. They couldn't enter in the promised land. It was due to their disobedience. But the text says they could not enter in because of their unbelief. And that directly connects yet again, belief and obedience and how close they are in the New Testament. All right. Thanks, everybody. We might talk a little bit more about that verse if you want, and then we'll pick up with the next one, verse number 8. When we meet next time.